In the medical world, there's this thing called the doorknob phenomenon. Here's how it works. Someone books an appointment with a doctor because they have a runny nose. So the doctor comes into the room, takes a look, tells the person to rest up and drink lots of fluids. But then just as the doctor has her hand on the doorknob and is about to leave, the patient says, "Oh, one more thing. I have this weird green thing growing on my foot. Can you take a look at it for 1 second?" In short, the doorknob phenomenon states that if there's something uncomfortable that needs to be said, people will wait till the very last possible moment to say it. And I suspect that that is what is going on in today's gospel as well. Since mid-June, we've been using the Sundays after Pentecost to progress through Luke's gospel. And over the summer and the fall, we've heard stories of astounding healings. We've witnessed moments of intense mercy and forgiveness. And we've watched Jesus lift up those whom society had cast aside. And this all sets the scene for today's readings. The uplifting gospel we just heard is a portion of Jesus' final public address recorded in Luke's gospel. Implicit in this address is Christ's acknowledgement that his time on earth is coming to an end. He spent the last 3 years of his life showing us how to love, teaching us how to forgive, and demonstrating that all are welcome in God's kingdom. Things we know we ought to be doing, but for so many reasons, oftentimes fail to do. It's a challenge for us to make the dangerous move from the knowledge of God to the love of God, that journey from idea into action. It's a challenge for us to go from thinking that forgiveness is a wonderful thing to actually forgiving. It's sometimes hard for us not to just think about this world of ours which needs to be healed, but to actually be the people who go out into the world as healers, mending this broken world of ours the best that we can. Nevertheless, this is our call, our journey to build that new earth we heard about in the reading from Isaiah, that place where we will be glad and rejoice forever. No more weeping, no more crying. Memories of that sinless garden God created for us so long ago. That kingdom come we so often pray for. While this work is hard, we luckily have inherited sacred tools to aid us in this earthly pilgrimage from head to heart. Toward the beginning of the service, we prayed, "Blessed Lord, who caused all holy scriptures to be written for our learning, grant us so to hear them, read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest them." Coming together to hear the word of God week after week plants seeds of hope in our mind about how we can go out into the world being imitators of Christ. And through baptism, we are promised the living water that will become a spring of water welling up inside us. That water that plants those seeds so they don't go dry. And as the love of God begins to take up root and sprout in our hearts, we go out into the world sharing the good news with others by word and deed. And we're promised that these sprouts will always have ample light so they may continue to grow, because Christ is the light of the world. Whoever follows him will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. But now, the divine doorknob confession. The one last thing that Jesus needed to get off his chest before the end of his public ministry. This work that he has called us to, it's not going to be easy. You will have to make sacrifices and reorder your life to be my disciple. And that will anger some people. In fact, as you go and bring about God's kingdom, they will arrest you and persecute you. You will be betrayed by parents and siblings, by relatives and friends. You will be hated by all because of my name. No wonder he saved that part to the end. It's hard to imagine anger, persecution, betrayal, and hate as reactions to this new earth we are called to create. But if we flip the page in Luke's gospel, we see it all. Jesus being turned in for a few pieces of silver, the crowd yelling, "Crucify him," and Christ looking down from the foot of the cross, wondering where most of his disciples had gone. Christ, more than anyone, knew the pain of living the gospel because he is the living word. But you and I know this pain as well. We are familiar with those bizarre reactions to moments of grace. How we forgive, but others don't like that we forgave that person. Or how we welcome others, but others don't like that we welcomed that person. When these feelings take over the hearts of others, and sometimes even our own hearts, we persecute, betray, and hate because we think that those recipients of grace don't deserve it. But that's the funny thing about grace. It's always undeserved. One of the biggest challenges of this world is not to meet grace with jealousy, lest we persecute, betray, and hate, but to meet grace with more grace, to share in those joyous and life-giving resurrection moments with others. Many years ago, a priest at my church asked if I would be interested in joining him on a visit to a homebound 90-year-old parishioner who had just returned from the hospital. As we settled in the cab, he said, "There's something you need to know about this parishioner." And the cab driver began to pull away, and the automatic locks on the door never sounded so ominous. I awkwardly looked over at the priest, who had a wide grimace on his face. He can be a little grumpy and can use some pretty abrasive language. And I chuckled because sometimes that can be me too. But for the rest of the cab ride over, I began to wonder what I would have in common with this 90-year-old curmudgeon, what we would talk about, what I would do if he got unruly, and on and on. But disclaimers aside, the person I met was a hilarious gentleman, a fellow lover of music, and someone who was passionate about the church, which, yes, meant sometimes listening to long tirades about what was wrong with every single Episcopal church in New York City and how they needed to do more of this and less of that. But he was also a person full of stories of how he served in World War II and how that had changed his life. A person who had photo album upon photo album of all the exotic places he had been around the world, and along with each of them, an enticing story. He shared stories of love and stories of heartbreak. Looking back at our time together, I realized that he gave me so many new perspectives and changed my life. I'll always remember that first cab ride over, those loud locks which seemed to say, "Buckle up, John," and how anxious I was about it all, what to do, what to say. But buried in today's ominous gospel is a gem I hope you will never forget. Do not prepare in advance, for I will give you words. This is Christ's promise to us all, that when we get outside our comfort zones and do our best to be agents of grace, when we respond to Christ's challenge to build that new earth, Christ will be with us in our anxieties, in our ineptitudes, even as the world works against us. And he will fill our hearts with everything we need to go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Behold, he is making all things new.